Hello, Rob, and thanks for coming along to our session of Made in Colwyn Bay, our series of interviews with local creatives and musicians and performers. It's good to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you too. Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Can I start by asking you a little bit about yourself and a bit of background to the sort of music that you're composing and performing? Do you want to start with that?
Yeah. Yes, I'm Rob. Live in Old Colwyn. Lived in Colwyn Bay now for how long's my daughter? About 12 years. So in North Wales, moved after university. So I've kind of lived there half my life now. I'm an electronic musician. I perform under the name of Etchasketch, and these days I predominantly create my music with a modular synthesizer, which is kind of lurking there in the background over my shoulder. Electronic music, a lot of it's kind of improvisational based. And using a modular synthesizer as the basis for those compositions.
So how did you get into it, Rob? And what are your influences?
Yeah, so I probably got into electronic music while I was at university, and the kind of golden age, at least for me, where bands like Orbital and Left Field, Underworld, Portishead, Massive Attack, there was a phase in British music where you had Chemical Brothers, all these kind of great bands coming out, and it for me that coincided for when I was at university, and you've got the time to explore and develop new tastes and that kind of thing. So that's where it came from. I love other forms of music as well, but electronic music has stayed with me all my life. Used to do a bit of DJing, but always had an interest in music production, and never really found a way into it. I use a computer for work, so doing it on a computer didn't really work for me. And then probably 5 or 6 years, I got into hardware as kind of music hardware became more accessible to the masses and a little bit cheaper as well in terms of being able to get into it. And then that was it. Then once I bought my first synth, I was hooked, and yeah, it's kind of led to where it is today.
So that I know there are different styles within a genre. You take Portishead and Massive Attack, Kraftwerk, whatever. They could all be described in some form.
Yeah,
but very different. They come from different directions. What would you say is your kind of primary driver?
I probably don't have one. I probably come from techno and house music was where I kind of initially developed my musical taste. And when I originally started producing music, it was probably more around the kind of house sort of techno style music. As I've got more into modular synthesis, it's become more experimental. So there'll still be beats and there'll still be an element of that structure of a house tune or a techno tune, but also more ambient stuff these days and noise and just developing different ideas. The modular leads itself to experimentation very well.
I think experimentation is obviously a key thing. And how does that translate then into performance and a kind of common experience? Because you see footage of gigs where thousands of people are kind of all immersed in the same sound, and yet it's come from an experiment.
Yeah, so I guess there's different ways of doing it. So I guess if you watch, say, something like the Chemical Brothers at Glastonbury, that's all very planned, and you can tell that because the fireworks go off. So at the big part, the tunes, you kind of think, well, yeah, that can't be that free. I think I akin it to kind of DJing. So when I'm doing an experimental piece, I kind of have a bit of a kind of A to B to C to D of kind of, I'll know what things are going to sound like and how I'm going to create a sound or a piece, but I don't necessarily know how I'm going to get there or how long it's going to take. So there's a loose structure there of knowing, yeah, that'll be a bit more of an ambient bit, that'll be a bit more of a dancier bit that'll be beats driven. And then it's a case of kind of moving between those different elements of a performance. So there's still something that ties it together, but at the same time, there's lots of room for experimentation within that, because within the modular, you're not necessarily stuck to kind of set patterns and set structures that are predefined for you. There's a little bit of that, but there's also lots of room to do other stuff as well.
So is it ever song based, or is it always instrumental?
Always instrumental for me. I do use vocal samples at times. I've got to the stage now whereby using the kind of modules and the setup I've got, I could turn it into what I guess some people would recognise as kind of a dance tune with a bit of a structure and a breakdown and building elements and building parts in and out of it. So that's possible to do, and I could, I mean, if I wanted to, I could design a whole set around that kind of thing. I generally end up getting distracted and going off down a few rabbit holes. So
could that sometimes be orchestral as well, or because I've seen strings used on pieces?
Yeah, so it depends. The fantastic thing about a modular synthesizer in particular is you put into that exactly what you want. One of my favorite modules, it's a tiny little thing. It's called a pluck. So it emulates the sound of a plucked instrument. So stick that through a bit of a reverb, and that can sound orchestral like a plucked instrument. So yeah, it can do, or it can sound quite electronic, and it can sound quite harsh. And of course, you bring samples into it, they can sound however you want them to sound, because it's just a sample. So all those elements are available. I think that's why I love modular synthesis so much, is you can build what you want. It's your sound, and the setup is exactly how you want it to be. And you choose your own limitations and your own kind of sounds.
Can you tell us a bit about Modulate and the type of events that you've put on and the scale of the events?
Yeah, so Modulate, I was looking before actually just to see when we started it. So we started in June 2018, and the first one was just a small, it was a small event. Those of you remember Cafe Number 44, and Ali Carter used to run in Colwyn Bay. So it was just in a little coffee shop, and I didn't really know whether anyone would come or not. It was a bit of a leap into the unknown, but I performed at Oscilloscope earlier in the year with Ed and Rob and Charles and those guys that I think some of you know, and I kind of thought I'd quite like to do something like this, but in Colwyn Bay. So set it up and promoted it, and yeah, turned up on the night, and Ed played at the first one, and my good friend Jules played, and just thought, well, it could just be the three of us and no one turns up. Right. But actually, people did come, and it was nicely full. But other performers came as well and said, "Oh, you're doing this?" There's a guy called, a good friend of mine now called Matt, who performs as Sword Swinging Robot. He came and said, well, I've wanted to perform live again for years. I'd love to do it. And it's like, okay, so now I've got somebody else. So the next time we did it, which was at the at Ali's Laundry Studios, we did it in the kind of studio there. Matt performed, and then some other people came along and became part of the community. So it's kind of evolved as a community of like-minded individuals, which is what I always wanted it to be. We don't charge for entry. There's no, the performers aren't paid to perform. It's completely free to access. And I guess the main reason I did it is I was conscious that I was producing this music at home in my studio with no outlet for it. And it just got me thinking, I wonder how many other people are the same. Right. And so trying to build a community where getting people out and sharing it and finding like-minded individuals who are also into doing it. And that's how it's grown. And then I think the third one, we moved to Sheldon's when Sheldon's opened in Colwyn Bay. So Julian, who part owns Sheldon, is a good friend of mine and performs as well. So it's kind of a natural place for us to go do it. And then that became our home. And we did quite a few events there. So Yeah.
I think all genres of music are a form of connection and social interchange. How have you coped? How have you coped with lockdown and with COVID? Have you found other ways to share the
Yeah,
music?
so it's interesting. So when so our last again, I was looking before. So our last scheduled in-person modulate was the 18th of March 2020, and we made the decision to cancel that.
Yeah,
I guess before lockdown had happened, just because I couldn't feel personally responsible for bringing people together, in respect to what the government said. I wasn't comfortable with it, so we cancelled that one. And then I guess I was sat thinking, well, this is a real shame because we've built this community, and I don't know how long this is going to last for, but I figured it'd be a while. So I made the decision to move the night online and actually do Modulate and just call it Modulate TV. And initially use the same people who were performing at our nights in person. And essentially, I guess for the same reasons, because I thought, well, if people needed an outlet, then they're
yeah,
even more likely to need an outlet when we're all locked down, unable to go out. So yes, we did Modulate TV online, and we've now done more. I think we've done more online shows now than we did face-to-face shows, because we've stuck to doing it every month, and it's been a while, isn't it? So I think it's our 12th one is a week on Sunday on February the 21st. So that'll be the 12th show that we've done.
okay.
Yeah.
And what are the plans as we come out of lockdown? What do you think? What do you look forward to?
So what's been really interesting in doing this is a couple of things. So one, we quickly realised that when we moved it online, we could open it up to people across the world,
Yeah,
not just locally. We've had people from Europe, loads of people from the States, from Canada, from Australia, all over the place who performed on Modulate TV. And some of those people have said, when this finishes, don't go back to just doing it in a physical location, because we've
right.
never been able to access physical gigs because of the remoteness of where we live. So we've talked about how we'd maybe do a mix of both. We're desperate to get back face to face and be able to see people and
Absolutely.
have that sense of community. And
Yeah,
the things I love about Modulate, it's not necessarily the performing, it's actually seeing everyone and being able to go around and chat to everyone who's come to kind of share it with us. So desperately want to do that, but I think in some form we've got to keep the online aspect of it going, because we've created this network of people now all around the world who also love what it's about. And I don't think we can just lose that when we go back to doing it in person. So yeah, but Sheldon's is still there. I'm desperate to get back in and give people a reason to come out and share again. So
absolutely. Yeah.
can happen soon enough.
Okay. Slight change of tack, really. The one thing about all kinds of music is about joining in.
Yeah.
And not they say everyone can sing. Can everybody use electronic equipment and make their own music? And if
So
you're interested, how would you go about doing that?
so I think the one thing I would say about the community overall, I mentioned the Oscilloscope guys and Ed and Charles and people like that, and Rob. It's a very accessible community. So great thing about Modulate is you can come, and we encourage people to come and talk to us about the gear we're using. The best story we had is a chap called Matt, who came to our second one, and some stuff had been going on in his life, and he just needed to get out of the house for a night. So he came along to Modulate, met some people there he didn't realise he was going to be there that he knew previously, and decided he was going to start doing electronic music. Within a year, he performed his first show at Modulate.
Fantastic.
And it was just lovely. Here's this guy who just kind of come along just to see what was happening and be inspired by it. And then with the support of the wider community of people who shared equipment with him, shared ideas, gave him encouragement. And yeah, I mean, he clearly had a bit of an aptitude and the desire to do it, but he kind of reached a point where all of us were just going, what you're waiting for? I mean, it's here doing work. It's just your friends, and we'll all look after you. And he performed, and it was, I think for all of us who've been involved, that was the best. That was probably the best thing that happened, was seeing somebody kind of go through that journey of kind of having not done it to being part of it. I think that's a bit easier in the physical form, because you can actually come and have a conversation and that kind of thing. I mean, we do the online shows, we have the online chat where people can talk to us and they can access the performers and talk to people and ask questions and that kind of thing. But I think face to face would be ideal. And we have talked about in the past sort of whether we could do kind of workshops or something whereby, as well as the performance, there's an aspect where people can come and have a go, and maybe a couple of pieces of gear that you can set up so people can actually try and do something. I think that's something we talked about a fair bit, but yeah, other things happened, didn't they? So we didn't get to the point of doing that.
Okay, so just drawing on that last piece about potential workshops and shared experience and so on, how do you see the arts and performance scene in Colwyn Bay? How do you see that unfolding and developing?
It's something I'm not given a huge amount of thought to during lockdown, if I'm honest. I think for the sake of my own mental well-being, I try and keep things in the present rather than worrying too much about the future. I think because we don't know when this will end or how it will end, it's kind of difficult to envisage that in a way. I would love for more people to get involved, and I'm very conscious, well, Modulate, it's not a particularly diverse kind of group of people, either in age range or I mean, it's mainly blokes of a certain age. We're not having midlife crises, whatever people say, but do you mean that's what it is, and that's just it's not through design. But I would like to find ways to open it up and make it more accessible. And we've never said no to anyone, but equally probably not found a way to access other people. So I don't know whether there's it's, and at the end of the day, it's a hobby on top of a busy full-time job and a family. So it'd be great if there was kind of, like you guys are doing with this, a more integrated way that we could link in and work with, because everyone involved would be only too happy to kind of share and kind of make it more accessible for more people.
I think that's a great note to end on, really, because if you tie in with what Together for Colwyn Bay are moving towards, that is very much about creating a community space which is inclusive and which does encourage people who want to just connect with others and promote a kind of an atmosphere of creativity.
No, absolutely. And I say that's why we did this. And I guess it worked in terms of finding those like-minded people who needed that sense of community. And I mean, there's probably 20, 30 people who regularly would engage on those Wednesday nights. But I think, like you, albeit we've all been locked down, I think my sense of community has only grown stronger through this experience, and you kind of realise what's important. So I think finding ways, especially for our young people, of giving them some hope and something they can get involved in. And you think at that age, you never know what's going to flick that light switch for you, do you? But it's something we'd love to be involved in, definitely.
Okay, that's a great note to end on. Thanks very much, Rob. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely. Thank you.